In our first episode of Career Guidance with Professor Nikhil Chrungoo, we learned a lot about life, matter, science, among many others. If you're a curious person like me who's interested to learn about life and much more, stay tuned to this episode. So tell us about what intrigued you towards science and why did you pursue it?
Nikita, the science is something which has to be interesting to everyone because it teaches us how to address any logical problem, any problem logically. And my way of thinking has always been something, why is it happening, what's happening, how can it be solved? So that has been throughout my childhood even. Even now I ask my students that if you put a finger into a plug, what's going to happen?
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. That if you touch a battery, this is what I ask my even MSc students from the two sides, what's going to happen? Said just a little bit of click will happen. Question is, why is that it is not a good idea to put your finger into an electrical socket and not so bad an idea to touch a battery? Then I explain to them that the voltage difference. There's a 12 volt battery, 8 volt battery, 1.5 volt battery and 220 volts which comes in the socket. So this is a logical question. So my thinking has always been like that. Ask, try to understand and try to understand how it can be solved. That's what prompted me. And what prompted me towards botany is the extent of we know nothing.
Right.
How a flower comes up with different colors. If we start asking this question to ourselves, we will understand that there's a great deal of understanding that we need to know from nature as a whole. And plants provide the best material for understanding nature. So that's what prompted me towards going in for studies in science as a larger subject, but as a plant science as a subject specific. I sit in my veranda in the morning, have a tea, and I don't know whether you notice, if birds come into the foray, you'll find the birds have a claw, and the claw there's a certain nail like this. Nature has evolved like this that it helps them to protect from falling.
Right.
So how is it? There was a program in Michigan State University for the students to develop an artificial claw of an eagle. So what it would do is eagle comes down, picks up the fish and goes out. Now this is happening with a claw. Can you develop a mechanical claw? Believe me, none could do it.
Why is that?
Because the synchronization of the action of what happens in your brain, how it gets translated into an action on the muscles,
Right.
muscles clamp at the right moment for the right purpose.
Right.
That is what is nature.
Right. So do you think it's more evolved and we still have a long way to go?
No, we still have a long way to go, long way to go. I tell students and even in the scientific community that we have evolved a discipline called bioinformatics, wherein we can sit on the computer and predict what will happen in nature. But I say, we don't know what is happening in the nature right now. So forget about predicting what is happening. Unless we know the changes that are happening, it's not going to work to some extent.
Because it's so dynamic.
It's so dynamic.
Yeah.
And this dynamism is the beauty.
Right.
And the best, most dynamic part of our body is our mind. Right now I am here. Immediately I might be in Police Bazaar and maybe in Guwahati, and within a fraction of a time I am back here. This is how the brain moves.
How limitless it is.
And it keeps on moving and thinking and doing. So if you try to understand how is it happening.
Right.
There was a student who was doing his BTech and he said people have cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And cerebral palsy, the problem is that the person may think, but he is not able to translate that thinking into an action. So the brain and the muscles coordination is lost. So his thinking was that can we convert the signal that is getting generated into brain into a signal that will go to a mechanical motor, and that mechanical motor will make our muscles work. That can be done, and that is done now. I asked one student, tell me what is missing in your laptop.
Okay.
He said everything is there. I said you go to your client or customer and you sign a deal and other things, what is missing? She could not answer. Then I say, what if you had a printer attached to a laptop? So you write up and take a printout immediately.
Yeah.
It's happening now. So things are evolving, changing, and this is only the scientific understanding of things that help us to do what we are doing right now.
So we spoke about scientific elements, we spoke about nature, we spoke about subjects like molecular biology, we spoke about botany. But to the core of it, don't you think there is an element so human in you that intrigued you to the subject and the understanding of nature and how intriguing it is?
Obviously. There is an
Like the
element.
mysteries of nature. Like
There is an element of which makes you question. And that questioning is the innate inquisitiveness that has to be in a person. Say, I give you an example. A child is born and the child has to be fed. This child holds his or her mother so carefully and effectively. Does the child learn? It is an inquisitive behavior which has transformed a child into a feel that he feels this is my mother. Similarly, the inquisitive nature of life is such that which makes us think how beautiful life is. And life will not exist unless this inquisitiveness exists. I forgot the name, someone somewhere has developed a chip. And this chip was inserted into brain of a person who was brain dead and was not able to move anything. It was a virtual coma. It was not. So what they made to do is generate a signal within the brain and convert that signal into a live action, and the person could speak. So nature has evolved like this in several ways, and that is what is intriguing, which is part of which we don't understand even now.
But don't you think we are required to be more conscious towards nature and not just awareness and information? I mean, there's no dearth of information in the digital age. But don't you think we need to be a little more conscious, a little more aware about how our environment and nature functions from a very spiritual point of view?
Yeah, we need to be, and we need to think that nature is something which, if it was not there as it is, we would not have existed. So we are a part of the natural ecosystem. And this earth, natural ecosystem, is also evolving itself. It is a dynamic component.
Right.
And if we make it stand static, then perhaps it may not behave the way it's behaving. Question you can ask yourself again, earth is tilted at an angle. Why is it tilted? Could it not have remained straight, 90 degree? It is tilted because that creates the weather conditions, the monsoon. It's up to you to think and answer the question, and that is what nature teaches us. And we are learning, every day we are learning from this.
Which also brings me to another area of fascination that I would want you to answer. What exactly is a pseudo cereal? And you mentioned buckwheat, and you that has been your area of research for the longest time. So can you tell us a little about what is it and why is it important, and what are your observations and takeaways?
Okay, there are plants have been, crops I'm talking about, they have been classified into different categories. From a layman's point of view, I'm telling you. There are grain crops, and there are cereals. Cereals are like rice, wheat, and grain crops are like, say, any crop which produces a grain, like quinoa is a grain. Now, there are crops which don't belong to either of the two categories. They have characteristics of both the categories. So they have been classified into a group. They are cereals but are not cereals because they produce grains. Buckwheat in this area is called a gerane.
Okay.
And it produces a grain. Now this grain has 15% protein content, and this is a highly digestible protein, number one. Number two is the presence of a lot of lysine in the protein. 5.6% lysine is present in the protein.
So what's the lysine?
I will explain to that. This is an amino acid which our body is not able to make.
Okay.
Like we take carrot, we get vitamin A. Vitamin A is essential for our eyesight.
Yes.
This our body cannot make, so we have to get it from external sources. So lysine is also an essential amino acid which our body cannot make. Rice, which in this region is the staple food, does not have any lysine. It has very, very negligible 0.03% lysine. So when we depend essentially on rice, we do not meet our nutritional requirements fully. See, there was a time when India as a country would be food insufficient. So we would import food. Changed time came the Green Revolution, and we started being able to export food. So despite that, large population of the country still remains undernourished because they didn't have the capacity to purchase. So even though we were exporters, but still in terms of global index of nutrition, we are lower on the scale. So when this story came up in the picture, the question came, how can we improve the standard of these? Like in children, wasting, stunting, focus shifted from food security to nutritional security. That means even if we get food, it has to be nutritionally balanced. We have to take different components. If we take rice exclusively, then we are not taking nutritionally balanced food.
Right.
So we need to take different foods, and for that we need to look for what are the different types of foods. That's one part. Like buckwheat came into picture because it has high level of antioxidants which are essential for our body, and it has high protein and essential amino acid. The second part which relevance with pseudo cereal, you mentioned about pseudo cereal, I will introduce another term at this stage, that is underutilized crops.
Okay.
These crops which are not in the public domain, they have a strong potential, but they are not utilized. So they have been classified under underutilized. Some people call them orphan crops, some people call them low utilized, different names. The concept was that 90% of our food requirements, calorie requirements are coming from just a few crops, out of which 50% comes from only three crops: wheat, rice and maize.
Right.
Right? Suppose there is some environmental catastrophe tomorrow and these crops are damaged, which they are more susceptible to, what happens? Can we depend on just three crops for our food?
Absolutely not.
So we have to increase the basket. Harvest those crops which we are not harvesting till this time but are economically and potentially important. Amaranth, grain amaranth, quinoa, buckwheat, taro, tubers crops. These are coming under this category. Buckwheat is important because it has high potential antioxidant potential, and it has high amino acid component of essential amino acids. That is how we got into this.
So is it affordable by the general public, or are these expensive crops?
No,
so to say?
I will come to that little bit later. Few years back, buckwheat was not cultivated large extent in Meghalaya. We had a 14th International Symposium on Buckwheat in Meghalaya in 2019.
Okay.
And state government got interested. We had around 300 delegates from all across the globe.
Okay.
There were some parliamentary questions also, how buckwheat cultivation can be improved. And starting from, I can say it because I have the records, from around 4 acres cultivation area last year, it's planning to go, the government of Meghalaya through Farmers Commission is going to around 1,000 acres in 2 to 3 years. And the entire crop yield is exported.
Okay.
So that's one part. Second part is it affordable? It's really affordable. But what is making it not utilized or consumed are our food preferences. We have grown over a period of time in taking rice. So we usually take rice. So what we intended to do is, we say buckwheat cultivation good, improve it. Can we harvest the economic potential of this crop by mixing it with some other crops? So what we did was, fished out some genes from this, and we put them in rice, black rice. So transferred some of the positive traits of this to black rice, and black rice is a delicacy.
Right.
But again, black rice is not the most preferred rice cultivars because of our taste preferences. This is what we have been doing, and we have been successful in 2 components. A large extent of information has gone into the scientific domain as well as the public domain about the importance of these crops. Nutritional security as a target area from the Government of India has now been focused to a large extent. We have moved from food security situation to nutritional security situation, wherein a focus on having a wider range of our food basket has come into picture. And then what we are saying is, can we fortify the existing cultivars with nutritional dense crops? So came as the concept of super crops or superfoods. And if we can convert, I don't know whether you have seen quinoa being sold in refill packs. The grains are harvested, they are processed, and they are converted into a functional food. So that is where we are aiming at. Similarly, buckwheat has starch, a lot of starch. This has peculiar properties which makes us believe that it can be used for industrial applications. In confectionery, it can be used. So that is how we transform our knowledge of basic sciences into a practical applicability and industrial applications.
For the betterment of
For
the
the betterment
society.
of the society.
Yes.
That's how we aim at it.
So when we're addressing concerns like malnutrition, undernutrition, stunting, how important is nutritional security and how does it come into the picture?
If we are not nutritionally secure, we can't do anything. That is this buzzword. If I am hungry, will I be able to think positively? No. If I don't have good antioxidants in my body, I am susceptible to different forms of diseases. And that's why Government of India has started a program called Poshan.
Right.
And Poshan lays focus on diversifying your food basket and trying to be healthy. And I must say here, is helping the community, especially the children, to a large extent. Midday meal scheme has been a similar concept, that our children should not be hungry. But the focus has now changed from food security to nutritional security. That is where the basket of food diversity is coming into picture.
Another important area of your study that I would like to address is saffron cultivation. Can you tell us a little about why it's important and the whole hype about saffron?
Saffron is the costliest spice in the world, and it's produced in a climate which is specifically called as Mediterranean type of climate. It needs certain peculiar type of environment at different stages of life. And in India, it's only grown in Kashmir.
Right.
But the problem with saffron is that there isn't much of diversity in the different cultivars. We don't have diversity, number one. Number two, it flowers in November. And in November, the temperatures are low, which damages the flowers.
Okay.
So, to prevent the damage to the flowers, we thought of a process, can we alter the flowering behavior and enhance or prepone the flowering from November to October. So change the agronomic protocols so that there is an early induction of flowering. And we have been successful in that, in inducing flowering in early October, where the frost damages in any area which is a winter prone area changes. That's one part, the practical application. Second practical academic application is its flowering behavior is different than say geranium or say gladiolus. Whereas geranium or gladiolus, I will say, it produces leaves first and then flowers. In saffron, the leaves come after the flowering has occurred. So we wanted to study what is that in saffron bulbs that induces flowering before the leaves emerge. And we have evolved or developed, I will not call developed, I will call we have now worked out a model which defines what are the components that are essential for regulating flowering in this important medicinal herb. It is a medicinal herb also. It is not only a spice, it has anti-cancer properties, it has anti-diabetic properties, it has anti-helminthic properties. It has been used as a part of Ayurvedic system of medicine since times immemorial.
So why is it so expensive?
Because it's from one bulb, 2 to 3 flowers are only produced.
Okay.
And our purpose is, can we increase the number of flowers? Besides preponing the flowering, if we know what determines flowering, we can change the flowering behavior to increase the number of flowers, so increase the yield. If the yield increases, the farmer gains more commercial produce, the costs come down.
Okay.
That is the purpose. And we have been successful. We had an all India program on that, network program with around 8 institutions working, and we have been able to achieve our targets in that.
Okay, so because we have time limitation, as a conclusion, I would like to ask you, what is your opinion about the National Education Policy 2020, and also what exactly is your opinion on meaningful education?
Meaningful education is not only a classroom education. Meaningful education is an education which leads a person to become a good citizen for his society, for his community or her community, and for the country as a whole. There are educated people, but not really educated. And there are not so really educated, but very good educated people. So our education should lead to development of good citizens. But developing only good citizens is not going to work unless those citizens become productive for the country, for themselves. So education has to be linked to production, productive environment, developing productive skills. Those skills which can help you gain useful employment. My own assessment simply is, I feel sorry to say this, we're producing a large number of graduates, but really unemployable.
Is it because of the lack of skill?
It's
focus?
because of the lack of skills. So we have to inculcate in the students the skills which will give them not only employment, that they can become good employees, but they can become even employers. So that's important, and to a large extent, new education policy thinks in those directions. What's important is how this policy gets implemented, how the funds are made available to implement this policy, and if that works, then it's going to be a game changer. But we have to see whether that works or not, because there are many changes which are being brought into this system, including establishment of higher education institutions, improving the quality of higher educational institutions. So there's a lot, and luckily, or thoughtfully I will call it, it is not that from tomorrow we are starting NEP. This program is going to culminate over a period of time till 2035, when it will be fully implemented.
With its own set of challenges.
With its own set of challenges.
Right.
So we hope it will work.
Right.
Let us see how it works.
Thank you so much for this
You're
insightful conversation. We learned a lot, and I hope our viewers enjoy the show.
Thank you
Thank you so
very much.
much. We had so much more to learn from Professor Chrungoo, and indeed it was a pleasure interviewing him. This is your host Nikita Gadal signing off for today. Stay tuned to Doordarshan Meghalaya.